I just got done with my nap.
Okay.
Are you getting ready for your extra life?
I'm doing extra life right now.
Oh.
I would love for you to stay, but I need to keep playing my games, okay? You can come back at 3:30, all right?
Okay.
Okay. Love you. Go see Mommy.
She's taking a nap.
Oh, she's taking a nap. Okay, then find something
Everybody except for you is taking a nap.
Oh, man, I'm jealous. Let's see. Anybody time that? It is too early for me to be losing it. Come on, Franson. Come on now. Focus. Holly and I, well, I used to tell this story when I was substitute teaching. I substitute taught for, about 7 years in a row. Since the start of Spirit Blade Productions in 2006. And it was just about 3 years ago that I stopped and began doing Spirit Blade stuff mostly full-time. A little bit of Mr. Mom thrown in there now these days. But anyway, I used to tell this story as a bit of an icebreaker when I would substitute teach, and I would always start by saying, all right, show of hands, how many people in this room have kissed somebody not family? And a few people would kind of sheepishly raise their hands or nod or whatever, and I said, okay, hands down. Now, show of hands, how many people in this room graduated from high school without ever kissing anybody? And they would all kind of look around sheepishly and say, we're still in high school. And I said, oh, okay, so that's just me then? And then there'd be little bits of scattered, laughter. And I would say the first time I ever kissed a girl was just before my 5th and final year of college. There was a singing and acting organization, which I mentioned earlier, it's called Continental Singers, where you audition in different parts of the U.S., they bring you together for a 1-week rehearsal camp, and then they send you off on your tour. Our tour was to Israel. Now, one of the rules of this organization is you're not allowed to express affection to anyone else on your tour. If you do, you get booted, sent home. Doesn't matter who you are or what you're doing, in the show. You get booted and sent home. So anyway, I didn't want to get booted from the tour, but I saw this girl and was talking to her, and I thought to myself, well, I want to express some affection to her. So how do I figure this out? So I went to the director. I said, hey, listen, when are we no longer bound by the rules of this organization? And he said, well, I suppose at the end of the tour, when we fly back from Israel to New York, my wife and I will leave the rest of you from there because they lived closer on, I think they had some family or somebody they were visiting on the East Coast, and the rest of us were flying back to California where we had started. And so he said, as soon as my wife and I leave you guys in New York, then you're on your own, you can do whatever you want. And so the last night we were in Israel, I wrote this note just expressing my feelings for this girl named Holly. And I had never done anything like this before. I had major, George McFly, Peter Parker syndrome, where I just could not handle any kind of rejection. And so I was really super nervous, and I just wrote out this whole handwritten letter expressing to her how I felt about her. So I gave her this note when after the director and his wife left. She was in line getting pizza or something like that at the airport, and I said, hey, had this folded up note, said, hey, I got something here I wrote, and I want you to, just take a look at it and let me know what you think, And so she was like, oh, okay, and she took it, and she thought at the time, she told me later, that it was like song lyrics to something I was working on, or she had no idea of the contents of this message. And so we get back on the plane from New York to go to California, and it's about a 6-hour plane ride. And we're sitting in different parts of the plane, so I can't keep track of where she's at or what she's thinking. I wanted to see if I could get an idea of how she was reacting to the note, and I couldn't see her anywhere. So the whole 6-hour plane ride back, despite being exhausted, I was having just nightmares, just freaking out and stressing over what's she thinking, what's she gonna do, And we got back, and I knew that she must have read the note by this time, but I didn't know what her thoughts were or anything like that. Everyone was saying goodbye to each other, so I knew I wanted to say goodbye to her, but I wasn't sure how to do it after expressing all the of my feelings, to her. And so I was like, a handshake seemed too formal. I mean, we'd spent time together and, developed, a friendship on the tour. So this would feel too formal. But after reading this note, I didn't want her to, like, feel like I was creepy or whatever. So I gave her actually one of those, like, safe hugs where there's, like, a mile in between you and the person that you're hugging. It's like, okay, you take care now, bye-bye. And we went our separate ways. And then I decided I would, after I got home, test the waters a little bit. And so I left her a couple of phone messages. She called me back, and we kind of started having this nice back and forth over the phone. And she was open to exploring, some form of relationship and seeing what it would lead to. This was a newsflash to me. I thought I was getting all these signals from her over the course of the tour that she was like flirting with me or whatever, and my radar evidently is completely off because she had never even considered me in that light. But now she was. So she was open to exploring it and talking about it. And so for about 3 months, like, all we did on the phone was talk. We just talked. And then we planned a visit where she would come out and visit me and my family, because I was still living at home at the time. And so she came out over a long Labor Day weekend and stayed in the guest room at my parents' house. And there were 2 things on the agenda as far as I was concerned on this visit of hers coming out. Number 1, I wanted to tell this girl that I loved her, because I knew that I loved her. And that phrase, I love you, that whole idea of love, it was so nebulous, and I think it still is a very kind of nebulous term, and a lot of people, when they say I love you, it can kind of come and go with the frickin' wind, so that people will say, I'm just falling out of love with this person. And so, well, is that really love, if you're falling out of love, and I talked to my dad about it, and I said, when did you know that you were in love with Mom? And he said, I don't really know what that means, He said, at one point, I was attracted to her, and I chose to love her. So it was for him, as it was for me, it was a decision based on, okay, I'm definitely attracted to this person, and we seem compatible, and we complement each other in a number of ways, and we're, I could just imagine life with her being a good fit. And so after kind of thinking about those kinds of things, he chose to love her. And so I thought that was great wisdom, and I thought very much in line with the biblical concept of love. It's a virtue, and it's a choice to prioritize someone over yourself, And so I was going to tell her that I loved her, and I was going to tell her what that meant to me, that it wasn't something that just was kind of coming and going with the wind. This was a commitment. This was something that I was committed to for as long as she would allow me to commit myself and my love to her. And so that was agenda item number 1. Agenda item number 2, I wanted to kiss this girl, because if I didn't kiss her, I was going to explode. But I wasn't sure what order to do it in, right? Because if you tell the girl that you love her first and then ask if you can kiss her, she might think that you telling her that you love her is this elaborate scheme to lower her emotional defenses so she will allow you to kiss her, right? But on the flip side of that, if I kissed her first and then told her I loved her, well, she knew through conversations we'd had on the phone that I'd never kissed anybody before. So I was afraid she would think that if I kissed her first and then told her I love her, she'd think I'm like high on my emotions. I have no idea what I'm saying. I'm just like, oh, I love you, and I didn't want her to think that, because, like I said, for me, I wanted to explain what love meant. It wasn't this, thing that was all dependent on emotion. So I was like, crap, I'm screwed. There's no way to do this right. Well, meanwhile, I'd planned every second of our time together, because I didn't want any awkward silences during our time, because I thought if there are any awkward silences, she might think, we're not communicating, so we're obviously not meant to be together. Let's just forget this whole thing. It's not working out. No. We're going to have perfect, constant communication at all times. So I planned every second. We were going to go tubing down a river nearby, but we got to the tubing place, and when we got up to where they rent out the tubes, they said, oh, sorry, folks, the water's a little bit too low. We're not letting anybody go out today. So I'm like, crap, this is 3 hours of our day that I had blocked out where we wouldn't have to talk, because if you've ever been tubing, it's this really relaxing kind of thing where you don't have to talk. You can just kind of shoot the breeze, and then you can just have silence where you're paddling around and just kind of enjoying, so it was good. The pressure was going to be off for 3 hours, and suddenly that opportunity was gone. And I had 3 hours of time to fill, and I was like, crap, what am I going to do? What if we have some awkward silences? I have to do something. And so we're driving back to my parents' house. I'm trying to figure out how am I going to fill the time. Should I kiss her? No, I'm not ready for that. Okay, I'll tell her that I love her. So I pulled over on the side of the road, and I told her that I loved her and what that meant to me. And I told her that I didn't need her to say I love you back. That's not what this is about. I just needed to express it and clearly define it, so that so that she would know what I mean anytime that I say I love you to her. She was very receptive and asked what I thought was a totally legitimate question. She said, well, if I'm not ready to say I love you, what do I say when you tell me that you love me? And I said, we'll just say thank you. And so for about 3 months it was, I love you. Thank you. Which felt great. But October 15th, she told me that she loved me, and it was awesome. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So the next day, after I told her that I loved her, we were going up to Mogollon Rim. Mogollon Rim is this place kind of up in the mountains. It's a nice naturey place. Some people like nature. I hate nature. Nature's the devil. Nature's out to get me. But some people like nature, so I thought we'll take her up there. And besides that, my dad was like, there's this nice pathway up on Mogollon Rim where you can walk together and be alone for a while, and you can, be alone for a while. He didn't say it like that, but that's how I like to tell it. And I was like, well, draw me a map, Dad. So he did. And we drove up there in my parents' minivan, because I'm way cool. And the whole time we're driving up there, in direct proportion to the elevation increasing, the bile is moving upward in my throat, and I'm getting more sick and more nervous the whole time, because I think this is the day I'm finally going to kiss a girl. I'd never kissed a girl before. I was like, this is it. What's going to happen? How's it going to feel like? Is it going to be weird? I have no idea. 5th and final year of college. We get to the top. I step out of the car. I take like just a few steps, and I'm like, and she's like, are you okay? Is it me? Do you want me to go back to the car? And I said, oh, no, it's not you. But if you want to go back to the car for just 5 minutes, I will be right there. And so I sent this beautiful girl back to the car, back to the van. And of course, as soon as she leaves, what happens? I feel like $1,000,000, right? So at this point, I'm like, okay, God, I don't get it. What does this mean? First I tell this girl that I love her, and now when I tell her when I want to kiss her, it makes me feel like I'm going to puke. So I'm getting some mixed signals here. And then I thought, no, it's not a sign. You're just reading way too deep into this. It doesn't mean anything. You just got to go over there and do it. So I clenched my fists and I walked back to the van, and I opened up the door, and I sat down in the driver's seat, and she was sitting in the passenger seat reading a book. She put it down. She said, you feeling better now? And I said, yeah. Hey, listen, would it be okay if I kissed you right now? And she said, yes. And so we did, and it was awesome. And we've been practicing ever since. A year from the day that I told her that I loved her, she'd moved into town by this point, we were driving along almost that same stretch of road that I told her that I loved her. And I pulled over on the side of the road. I said some mushy stuff that I won't repeat here, and then I asked her if she would please marry me, and she said, of course I will. And then in January of '02 is when we were married. Yeah, it's just been a really great, interesting, stretching, all kinds of things type of ride since then. As you know, now this January will be our 15-year wedding anniversary. And we both feel like, man, I didn't know who I was marrying, How did I make that decision that early on? But we're just so grateful to have God just orchestrate that whole thing on 2 different parts of the country were brought together, and yeah, it was really something. So anyway, that's how I met my wife, Holly. One thing that I love about Holly is that it's this really nice cocktail. I don't think I would have done well if I would have married a full-on geek, because I'm a very opinionated geek, as you may know, if you've listened to any of my thoughts on geeky things. And I don't think I would have enjoyed living with another geek and risk having such passionate yet different opinions and likes and dislikes about things. She is so easygoing about entertainment, but she's not super particular about like the geek stuff she's willing to enjoy. A lot of things she's willing to enjoy with me just because I enjoy them, which is really neat. That's not a gift I always have. In fact, not often do I have that. But her dad is a geek, so she was raised in part by a hardcore Star Trek geek. maybe not hardcore, but I mean, he's watched every Star Trek series, really enjoys it, you know. And she had a brother who played Dungeons and Dragons when he was in high school. So she was, you know, raised around geeky things, even though she wasn't like a big fan herself. And so she has like this acceptance of it, which, you know, you can imagine would obviously be very important. And what's crazy is there's so much, you know, I talk about how God brought us together and orchestrated that. There's so much about us that makes us compatible. You know, she's like an audience for me. You know, we're both introverts, but she is not talkative. She likes to just listen so often and just allow someone else to carry the conversation. And so I can be a performer and share my ideas and my opinions, and she just, you know, is content and sometimes even enjoys listening. And so she's an audience for me. She's a companion for me for the, you know, and understanding of all my geekiness. And there's so many things about the way that, so many aspects of our compatibility that we never could have known in the brief time we knew each other on that tour before I started, you know, kind of courting her. It was just a mercy and grace that God brought us together that way. And so I'm just so grateful for that. Likewise, you know, I mentioned in my story, I thought I was getting all these signals from her. I thought she was flirting with me. And that's the only reason I was bold enough to share my feelings with her. And so I felt like that was just a moment where God allowed me to be blinded, just misinterpret signals, because I never would have been brave enough if I didn't think she was totally flirting with me. So there's just so much, and there's more that I couldn't bring to mind right now about that I'm just so grateful. I'm just so grateful.